Hello and welcome to Katie Pavlich Tonight. Well, President Trump pauses Project Freedom in the Strait of Hormuz, but he's keeping Iran on notice and teeing up a complete and final agreement.
We can't let Iran have a nuclear weapon. You can't let a bunch of lunatics have a nuclear weapon, or the world would be in trouble.
They should check themselves before they wreck themselves in the direction that they're going.
Plus, this just into Katie Pavlich Tonight in the newsroom. An out-of-control protest is happening right now outside of a New York City synagogue and school. We're monitoring it. And here's a question. If Congresswoman Ilhan Omar has nothing to hide, then why is she refusing to cooperate with Minnesota's fraud investigation? Maybe that was an accounting error, too. More on that in just a moment. But first, the Met Gala was held last night in New York, and the usual red carpet oddities also featured some attempts at social activism. Take, for example, actress Sarah Paulson, who walked the red carpet with a dollar bill taped across her eyes. The look was straight from a Paris Fashion Week collection titled The 1%, so really it should have been a $100 bill. Her attempt at a statement about wealth while attending an elite $100,000 per ticket event, while also being worth millions herself, was rightfully panned by many and even called tone deaf by Cosmopolitan. Paulson was not alone in trying to call out wealth and success while standing atop the privilege the left decries. This brand of Champaign Socialism is apparently all the rage. As a candidate for Los Angeles Mayor Spencer Pratt highlighted in a now viral campaign ad, these alleged advocates for working-class Americans live in million-dollar homes, not in the mess that the policies they advocate for creates.
This is where Mayor Vass lives. You notice something? Or here, where Nikki Raman's $3 million mansion sits. They don't have to live in the mess they've created where you live.
This isn't just a problem in LA's city government. Hassan Piker, who called to let the streets soak in red capitalist blood, has used America's free market system to amass a net worth of roughly $8 million. Seattle's Mayor Katie Wilson, a self-described socialist, laughed when asked if her tax increases would drive businesses away. She now oversees the budget of America's 18th largest city, but was still financially supported by her parents throughout her campaign. Graham Plantner, the presumptive Democratic nominee for U.S. Senate in Maine and Nazi tattoo aficionado, tried to pass himself off as a bootstrapping oyster man, but he comes from a wealthy and prominent family, and his father reportedly gave him $200,000 to buy a house. And of course, the New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani has also benefited from a privileged life. His wealthy family owns a multi-million-dollar compound in Uganda where he had a lavish wedding. But that hasn't stopped him from actively bullying wealthy New Yorkers who are proving willing and able to leave the Big Apple. Let's bring in Mike Nellis, a former senior advisor to Kamala Harris's 2019 campaign and author of The Endless Urgency on Substack. Great to see you. Thanks for being here tonight. First, let's start with New York, keeping the focus on Mayor Mamdani, where he always wants it to be. His Tax the Rich video, naming and shaming Citadel's Ken Griffin. He responded today. Take a listen.
And now what the mayor of New York has made clear to my partners, and principally my New York partners, is that we need to double down on our bet in Miami.
All right, Mike, so they're leaving and they're taking all those jobs with them.
Well, they're going to head to Miami. That's got a new Democratic mayor for the first time in, I believe, like 2 or 3 decades.
But is he a Democratic socialist or a Democrat?
Well, I'm just making the point that I think Republicans are losing an awful lot of elections right now. I mean, you're talking about all the Democrats on my side that have rich parents, but we're not talking about the Republicans right now. I mean, Donald Trump's kids are making deals in front of the Pentagon right now that Trump is helping them get through. So I think we've got a problem of nepotism. I think we've got a problem with both political parties being out of touch with working class Americans right now. And it was on display at the Met Gala with Sarah Paulson with that ridiculous mask that she had on. It was on display in Washington today, where Senate Republicans are trying to pass a bill right now to spend $1 billion a year money to build Donald Trump his stupid ballroom. So I don't think anything is getting done to help working people right now.
All right. Well, I understand you are opposed to the ballroom. That is something that is not for Donald Trump. It's for future leaders, and you know that. There are lots of events held for leaders all around the world in tents on the South Lawn of the White House. It's not great. But let's get back to the hypocrisy here. You say that Republican kids are making money. Yeah, but they're not also calling for the blood of capitalists to be taken in the streets like Hassan Piker. They're not standing outside of people's homes and shaming them for their success. So why is there all of this hypocrisy with these Champaign socialists who are perfectly happy with living high on the hog, privileged lifestyle, but they don't want it for the rest of us?
Well, hey, look, I'm the first person to tell you that I think there are a lot of liberals who are living high on the hog that don't know what it's like to come from a working class family. And as somebody my mom stayed home and my dad was an FBI agent working on a government salary to raise us. Like I came from basically nothing relative to a lot of these people. But again, that hypocrisy is abounds. Republicans are the first one to complain about welfare and SNAP and cut benefits and stuff like that. But we're governed by a billionaire right now. Donald Trump's got more billionaires in his cabinet who've never really worked a day in their life. His kids, they act like they hit a home run. They were born at the plate. Like, come on.
Okay. So you're
hypocrisy's
arguing
everywhere.
that
You can make the same argument everywhere.
Donald Trump, whose father started a real estate business from scratch,
Whose father started it from scratch,
who then passed it along, because that's what happens in real estate. You pass things along, you grow businesses to develop companies, not just in the United States, but all over the world, who employ thousands of working class people and support local economies, whether it's in Chicago, whether it's in New York City. And so you can't say that they've never worked a day in their life, especially while you have Don Jr. and Eric Trump and Ivanka all standing on their own 2 feet when it comes to working inside that business.
Katie,
it's a very different scenario than taking your parents' money and then demanding that working class people, especially New York, pay more taxes to pay for your pet projects.
All right, do I get a chance to answer, or are you going to filibuster me on your own show, Katie?
I mean,
your core argument is right that there are a lot of people in the country that are hypocrites on this stuff, but Donald Trump is the world's most famous Nepo baby, all right? His dad built that business. He handed it over. He basically ruined it. And the only reason he's been able to grow his net worth by so much is through outright corruption in Washington right now. In the last year, Donald Trump has made $4.5 billion to grow his net worth. He's got his kids selling contracts to the Pentagon for drone strike technology that's going to aid in this stupid war that they're doing in Iran, which the American people don't want, just like the ballroom, just like everything else that this president does. So if he wants to get to work to help support the American people, fine. But earlier today, Donald Trump said, I wrote it down just to make sure I said it to you, that gas prices being higher right now at $5 and $6 in most of the country is a small price to pay. A small price to pay for what? When you're a billionaire who's never really worked with your hands. Iran is nowhere near having a nuclear weapon, and the American people aren't buying that lie. No, they weren't. They weren't before the war. They weren't before. No, listen, Donald Trump cut up the Iran deal that Obama made, and now he's stuck in this situation. He can't figure out how to open his nuclear weapon. No, it didn't, Katie, and you know that.
It did nothing about the ballistic missile program, which is really what they're also going after.
Tulsi Gabbard herself said that they were nowhere near having a nuclear weapon. There's no justification for this war.
The president
and meanwhile, the average person watching this right now is paying $5 a gallon for gas. And that's why Donald Trump's approval rating is cratering.
I understand. And I do think that $5 a gallon for gas is something that is hurting the American people, especially the working class. But the president has tried to explain that he believes it is in the best interest of the United States for the Iranian regime not to have a nuclear weapon, and that it will be over in due time. But I want to get over to LA before we let you go. Spencer Pratt, of course, is running for mayor. He highlighted how these progressive leaders insulate themselves from the consequences of their own policies. We had J.J. Smith on last night to talk about the consequences in San Francisco. There's this harm reduction program that actually does more harm than good. Is this a reality check for any of these folks who are in these positions? I mean, you can't tell me that working class voters in Wisconsin are happy looking at the policies of San Francisco and New York and that they want that to come into their neighborhoods or their congressional districts.
I mean, probably not, but let's talk about Spencer Pratt for a second, because I thought that ad that they put together was really well done. But Spencer Pratt doesn't live in that trailer where his house used to be. He's living in another $2.5 million house. So maybe he should tell the truth about where he actually lives instead of trying to score cheap political points after something horrible happened, the natural disaster and the fires in LA. I think this is on your original point.
Disaster, but
well, I mean, you know what I mean. But look, Republicans love to do this thing where they complain about the problems in LA, they complain about the problems in New York, and there are real problems there. I'm in Chicago, there's problems here, but there are also problems in Republican states all across the country. So I think voters in Wisconsin probably care a lot more about what's happening in Wisconsin, and voters in California care a lot more about what's happening in California. My advice to Republicans is spend less time complaining about big Democratic cities and spend more time fixing the problems in your state, because Mississippi is the poverty capital of this country. Louisiana is the murder capital of this country. Arkansas is the teen pregnancy rate capital of this country. Go deal with those issues. Then you come lecture us in big cities.
Well, the average Mississippian is richer than the average person in Great Britain. So I think there's a big contrast there.
That's irrelevant to me in Great Britain.
And just because red states have blue cities that pull down or drive up their crime rates and everything else doesn't mean you can blame it on
it's always the
governors.
Democrats' fault. The party of personal responsibility can never take responsibility for the problems in their own states.
Well, they're not responsible for democratic policies and that are implemented by Democrats.
Listen,
that's for sure.
when you run for office, you're responsible for what happens in your state. So if you're the governor of Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, you're responsible for that stuff. Get to work, pick up a shovel,
education in Mississippi is better than in New York and California at this moment in time. So we will see. We'll compare notes.
It's on the rise. That's one of the few things they're doing right.
One of the few. Okay, we'll agree on that. Good to see you, Mike. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, well, efforts across the country continue to expose and root out fraud within programs funded by hardworking taxpayers. In Minnesota, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar finds herself under a microscope. Omar failed to appear before a state oversight committee and was given a deadline of today, May 5th, to turn over documents and written answers to the committee's questions, specifically about her communications with fraudsters convicted in the $250 million Feeding Our Future scam. Well, investigations in Minnesota helped make fraud a national story. Taking taxpayers for a ride and stealing their money is not unique to Minnesota. The Daily Wire rolled out new reporting this week on massive amounts of Medicaid fraud, bleeding taxpayers dry in Ohio. The series is from their investigative reporter, Luke Rosiak, and he joins us now along with the Inspector General of the U.S. Department of Labor, Anthony D'Esposito, who is also on the president's task force to eliminate fraud. Great to see you both. So, Luke, just give us an update on what you published today about your series titled Medicaid Millionaires and what you found with your reporting.
Sure. So this is what I call taxpayer-funded butlers for Somalis. If you can believe it, this is what we've come to. Medicaid is actually paying for people to come clean their houses, cook them meals, even just provide them companionship and conversation. Anything you need, they'll just swing by your house and help you out. The worst part is a lot of times it's actually just their own family members billing the government for that companionship and conversation. And this all happens under the Medicaid program, which is supposed to be, of course, for medical expenses, but certain states, including especially Ohio, have what they call waivers, allowing them to do extra things. In this case, what they call personal services, which is the technical term for stuff that isn't actually a medical service at all. So yeah, taxpayer-funded butlers for Somalis in just Ohio alone cost about $1 billion a year.
Wow, $1 billion a year just in that case alone. That's crazy. Anthony, of course, the federal government has lots of resources to investigate this kind of thing, but this amazing reporting from Luke and others is bringing a lot of this to light. So are you using this kind of information that Luke is producing to go after these kinds of fraudsters? Are you using it in addition to the investigators? What are you finding on the government level?
Absolutely. It's extremely helpful because it tells the story to the American people and lets them know what the prior administration in Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, that they literally allowed fraudsters to pillage American taxpayers. And the fact is that now we have a president in Donald J. Trump. We have a vice president in J.D. Vance. President Trump signed an executive order putting this fraud task force together, led by J.D. Vance, and they are making sure that investigators have every resource necessary to investigate, to hunt down these fraudsters and put them behind bars. The fact is that in the prior administration, we had U.S. attorneys and others that were putting aside fraud investigations, saying that it didn't meet a certain threshold. Vice President Vance has made it very clear. There's no fraud too small and there's no fraud too big. We are going to hunt down each one of them and make sure that they are brought to justice and they are held accountable for taking taxpayer money.
Well, it's been nice to see also the Trump administration push aside the false accusations of somehow attacking these social services that good people actually need when you're actually just going in to look for fraud and to make sure that stolen money is not being taken away from those who actually could benefit from these programs. But Luke, Vice President J.D. Vance just mentioned, he shared your reporting and says that he's directed the administration's fraud task force to look into what you found. And just a week before winning the GOP nomination in the governor's race in Ohio, Vivek Ramaswamy called your reporting very intriguing and not shocking, and added that he would prosecute fraud like this aggressively if he wins. So have you heard anything from the White House or state officials about your Ohio reporting?
Well, it's all still very early. I mean, I'm rolling out a 5-part series, and they were mostly reacting to the first one, which is really just introducing the existence of this program. We haven't even gotten into the meat and potatoes of it. So had another story today, which has some evidence of the very, very shady characters that occupy these buildings that I went to that are almost entirely empty. And throughout the week, we're going to be bringing you the case studies of these people, for example, who have extensive criminal records and are allowed to nonetheless own medical firms or Medicaid firms that bill $1 million a year. There is a woman that had a janitorial company, and she just renamed her company to be called like One Community Mental Health, started billing $100,000. Another guy billed $22 million overall, $1 million a month, You go on Facebook, it says he lives in India and he's switching businesses to help Indians write college admissions essays to get into the US that way. So it's these, I didn't see American barely the whole time. There's, mail piled up under the door. One of the doors didn't even have a doorknob. So these are basically shell firms that are middlemen that take a cut as people get paid to hang out with their family members. And if we can't prove fraud there, then we've got to look at a policy change that eliminates this program entirely.
Yeah, I mean, Anthony, it's difficult to prosecute these things at the federal level, and there are a lot of these states like Minnesota and California, for example, don't want to help the federal government rid these programs of this type of fraud. But there's a lot of it. I mean, billions of dollars of hardworking American taxpayer money, American money, that is being stolen. So how does your office and the task force plan to hold these people accountable? Is it what Luke says? You need to just eliminate the programs altogether and start over? It seems like the fraud is so widespread that you can't just look through it and hope that you find everything.
Well, I think for the immediate, it's the fact that President Trump and Vice President Vance are providing the resources that we need. President Trump nominated a U.S. attorney focused on fraud. Colin McDonald has been in touch with all of the investigators, explaining exactly the resources that we could have in our offices, making attorneys in our office special U.S. attorneys so that we can see the investigation right through the prosecution. I mean, there is hundreds of billions of dollars that is at stake here, and it's become really a wholesale government approach where every agency, every department is utilizing the resources given by the president and vice president to investigate and to hold these people accountable. I mean, just a couple of months ago in Boston, we had UI fraud and SNAP benefits where these two individuals were actually utilizing it to run a restaurant. I mean, we have over $1 billion that we found on prepaid debit cards from the pandemic that now we are working with the U.S.
well, that's
Treasury.
where a lot of this started, was all that COVID money that was floating around, and it's just gotten worse. But we will continue to follow it. Taxes should never be raised again with this amount of fraud going on. Luke Rosiak and Inspector General Deposito, great to see you. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Katie.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, now on to this. The president of Cornell University was held hostage by a group of radical student protesters after a campus discussion on Israel and Gaza.
You obviously have an agenda that you want to
President Kotlikoff.
You're running a student over?
Hear how he's pushing back on the woke mob. Well, just tonight, President Trump announced that Project Freedom, which allowed the movement of ships through the Strait of Hormuz, will be paused because he says a great progress has been made towards a complete and final agreement with Iran. The naval blockade is still in full force at Iranian ports, squeezing their economy.
Well, you'll find out, because I'll let you know. They know what to do, and they know what to do. They know what not to do, more importantly.
And Secretary Rubio is urging for a diplomatic solution to be reached.
We have to have a diplomatic solution that is very clear about the topics that they are willing to negotiate on and the extent and the concessions they're willing to make at the front end in order to make those talks worthwhile. They should check themselves before they wreck themselves in the direction that they're going.
I love that. All right, here to break it all down, let's bring in former State Department official David Tafuri, Democratic strategist Scott Bolden, and GOP strategist Tiffany Smiley. Great to have all of you here. Thank you so much for joining me. So, David, let's start with you. Your response to Secretary Rubio and whether we actually can reach a diplomatic solution here.
Well, Project Freedom, which started yesterday, and we were just learning about how the U.S. was going to do it. It involved 100 different aircraft. It involved 15,000 U.S. service members. That took a lot of planning. It's now Project Pause. And that was a sudden item to learn about today. And President Trump's announced this, and he is saying that they are close to having a deal. But he's said this several times over the last 2 months, many times, explaining to the American people we are really close. Iran wants a deal. But everything we know about what Iran has said suggests they don't want a deal. They did a 14-point plan, which they gave to President Trump. My understanding is that it's very long on text, very short on compromise. So far, Iran still has not given in on any of the points, including the most fundamental point for the Trump administration, which is that they should give up their nuclear weapons program.
Right, exactly. Tiffany, I mean, again, here we are with Iran being disingenuous, trying to negotiate, buy time. I think the question, too, is this just a time for the United States to reload for a bigger operation, given how much military firepower has been moved into the region?
Yeah, look, I mean, DJ Rubio said it best. They better check themselves before they wreck themselves. I think that's an Ice Cube, a good old playback to Ice Cube. But Iran is difficult to deal with, and the president knew that. And I always like to say, and I think Marco Rubio laid it out really well today, is that there has been no president. They all talk about dealing with Iran, but the only president to deal with Iran was President Trump. And he was willing to take that liability on, not just for today, but for the future and for protection of the future, because Iran with a nuclear weapon would mean they control the whole Strait of Hormuz for the whole future. And the world. And so obviously we can talk about the implications of the national security and the global supply of oil. But the fact of the matter is, it needs to be addressed because we're heading into midterms and it's affecting gas prices domestically here at home.
Yeah, Scott, I mean, Democrats from the beginning have not been helpful in terms of even rallying around this operation at all. They've used every situation they could to go after the president domestically because they want to win elections in November. They are using the gas prices as one of the talking points on the economy. Of course, that is something that is affecting Americans. The president's argument is it's a short-term problem for a long-term issue that we've been battling for 47 years, and it will be worth it to have a nuclear-free Iran. How do you see it as a Democrat?
It'd be great to have a nuclear-free Iran. I think there has been a president who engaged Iran, and it was a deal that was working, and that was President Barack Obama. You know, one of the things, when we talk about the Iran situation, no one talks about that the U.S. is driving this entire negative narrative. That is, 10 presidents before Donald Trump looked at doing exactly what Donald Trump is doing, and they begged off on it. That doesn't make them cowards. That makes them smart. It doesn't make Donald Trump smart. He's bold, he's aggressive, if you will, but what if we gotten out of this? And then when you negotiate, for example, right? When you talk about Iran being difficult to deal with, Iran is difficult to deal with because it understands it has a vote in this war of choice, and it's got the Straits of Hormuz. It does have that. And so why would they give that up? Give me three.
They kind of already did. Blockading their ports.
Yeah, okay. But tell me why they would settle or negotiate a peace.
That's why.
A peace deal with the U.S. when they have a vote and the Straits of Hormuz, and they're affecting our own economy, and they're affecting Donald Trump politically on a war that he started.
Well, he did not start the war. The Iranians started the war 47 years ago by taking our people hostage. They have killed hundreds of Americans, if not thousands of Americans, maimed U.S. troops in Iraq, in Afghanistan, all over the Middle East. But David, in terms of what's happening in the Middle East, it's not just the United States that is taking this on. You have the UAE that was attacked recently. The ceasefire has been broken by Iran multiple times. I think the United States has been very patient with that. It's not just the U.S. It's the Saudis. It's the Gulf states who have been saying publicly with their diplomats on television, their ambassadors, that Iran cannot behave this way. This is not how normal 21st century allies behave or neighbors behave. So this isn't just about the U.S. or the president.
I agree with you about that. The Gulf countries have been substantially affected. It's really hurting their economies. It's hurting tourism. The UAE in particular has taken something like 60% of the airstrikes by Iran, and so they're reacting very negatively to Iran now attacking them again. But I also want to point out that President Trump says the ceasefire is in place, which is sort of ridiculous. How can you claim it's in place when Iran is doing airstrikes on tankers that are trying to pass through the Strait of Hormuz that were being escorted by U.S. naval ships? It's also apparently tried to attack U.S. naval ships, and it's attacking our allies in the Gulf. Yeah. There isn't a ceasefire, and to claim there is one is tipping your cards and showing that President Trump wants a deal so badly, he's willing to call what is not a ceasefire, and I think Iran knows that, and Iran is going to use that at the negotiating
table. Well, you know how this works. We cease, they fire. That's how it often happens. Dealing with the Iranian regime and their terror
proxies. We don't do anything about it either, though.
Well,
Let's
we might.
do something about
if you
it.
did, you might criticize it. But I have to get to this story because it's absolutely outrageous. I want to get a reaction from all of you about this. There's two videos of Cornell University's president, Michael Kotlikoff. He was held hostage in his car by his own students after a discussion about the Israel-Palestinian conflict, the pro-Hamas side of that debate, following him to his car, keeping him there. he seemed to be having a very cordial conversation with them. And then they, of course, filmed themselves getting their foot run over after they put their foot near the car. Tiffany, it's just another example of what's happening on our campuses with this pro-terrorism attitude.
Yeah, it seems to be a real radicalization of our youth in this country. And we can no longer pretend or say, oh, it's not happening in our colleges. We know it's happening in our colleges. And we need to get back to good, honest, good faith debates. And perhaps these students should maybe take a civics course, or maybe they need to go back and learn about the founding of this country and the freedom of speech and what constitutes a crime, because this is absolutely unacceptable. And they need the parameters. They need to know why they have freedom of speech in this country, and that people fought and sacrificed for it, and that nothing is free here. And they should maybe engage in civics a little bit and give back to this country.
Yeah, Scott, what about the legal implications here? We saw at Columbia, there was a janitor who was also taken hostage by similar people taking these tactics. Is there any recourse for the president in this situation?
Well, there certainly is. He can suspend these students. It's interesting, he can suspend the students or those who are not students, because there were some who were not students. They can also be arrested. They can still have an ongoing investigation. The irony of this situation was, as I read the reports, was that this was a debate between Israel and Gaza where there were both sides or multiple sides having this political union, which seems to be a healthy debate, which is what everybody would want. And then blocking the president in or harassing the president on purpose, trying to get him to hit one of them so then they could kind of fall out, seems very childish and not only inappropriate, but doesn't move the ball forward.
Yeah, David, 10 seconds. Your reaction.
Well, I agree with Scott. I mean, I like how this started. It was a debate, and you want the president to be debating the students, and the president seemed eager to debate them, but then he wanted to leave. The students got too close to his car. Really unfortunate things happened. I wish the students had just backed off and took up the debate another day.
Well, taking hostages is a Hamas tactic, and
if
I don't
only
like
for a few
seeing it
moments.
on campuses.
Right.
Yes. David Tafuri, Tiffany Smiley, and Scott Bolden, thank you for joining us. Great to see all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, the FBI director has a message for the Pima County Sheriff over his botched handling of the Nancy Guthrie case. Brian Enton is here with new information up next. Well, nearly 100 days into the search for Nancy Guthrie, and the Pima County Sheriff's Department doesn't have a single suspect. And now FBI Director Kash Patel says Sheriff Nanos and his department forced the feds onto the sidelines during the case's most crucial moments. Joining us now, NewsNation senior national correspondent Brian Enton. Brian, tell us more about what Director Patel said.
Yeah, we knew a little bit of this, Katie, but I had no idea some of these details. When Patel spoke with Sean Hannity, he said that they were essentially kept out of the Nancy Guthrie investigation. The FBI was for the first 4 days. The first 4 days, they wouldn't involve the FBI. And you know how important the first 48 hours can be with a missing persons investigation. So that was shocking. The other thing is, and I had no idea about this until Director Patel said this today, that they had an airplane. The FBI had an airplane in Arizona on standby, ready to take the DNA from the Nancy Guthrie crime scene back to Quantico so that it could be tested. And we now know that this was a hair strand, a very important hair strand that was found inside the house. But the sheriff decided not to send that DNA to the FBI lab, instead to send it to their private lab in Florida. In fact, the FBI didn't even get that hair strand until a couple of weeks ago. We knew there was frustration about that, but we had no idea. The FBI actually had a plane on the ground, ready to go, and the sheriff just ignored them.
Unbelievable, but not surprising, given what we know about the way he has handled this case. Your new special on the Nancy Guthrie mystery airs tomorrow night on the CW at 9 p.m. Eastern. What can you tell us about what we're going to see with that and the expectations that you have for us to watch?
Yeah, really looking forward to this, an hour-long special. We take you all the way back to the beginning. You know, I was in Tucson for almost 2 months. We've got an inside look at the investigation. We've got a source who comes forward from behind the scenes. We put them back in silhouette to give us more information about sort of the frustrations among the investigators. And then this is interesting, Katie. We have this panel of former FBI profilers, some of the most famous profilers in the world. We brought them together. We sat them at a table together. We showed them everything that we found, and we said, what do you think happened? What do you think the motive is? And that was fascinating. I mean, they don't even think it was a kidnapping or ransom. I'll tell you that. So it's interesting what they came up with.
Okay. Well, Brian Entin, you've been absolutely remarkable on this story. So thank you for joining us, and we will watch your special on the CW. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Katie.
All right, moving on to a case that could have a major impact on our Second Amendment rights. The Trump administration is suing the city of Denver and its police department to try and end its ban on sporting rifles. The Justice Department asked that Denver stop enforcing the ban, which has been on the books since 1989, and restricts the sale of certain kinds of semi-automatic rifles like AR-15s and other models. Denver's mayor responded to that request with a resounding no.
They have requested that response by today. So we're here today to let them know that our answer is hell no. No, we will not roll back a common sense policy that has kept weapons of war off of these city streets for 37 years.
Joining us now is Doug Friednash, Democratic strategist and former chief of staff to Colorado Senator John Hickenlooper. Great to see you, sir. Thank you so much for being here tonight. So, you know, AR-15s are owned by tens of millions of people across the United States. The Department of Justice Civil Rights Division is making the argument that the Denver ban is unconstitutional and infringes on the Second Amendment rights of people who live there. So what is your response to this new lawsuit?
Thank you. Great to be with you, too. Look, I think this is obviously part of Todd Blanche's effort to be the permanent attorney general. This is a law that's been on the book for 37 years. It's worked. Denver's had the steepest decline in homicides of any large city in the country in the last year. From a constitutional standpoint, this dog won't hunt. Similar laws have been upheld in 6 appellate court jurisdictions since the Supreme Court case in Bruin. And I don't think they can meet their burden and can show that there's a common use of assault weapons in self-defense. It's not about the number of weapons that's out there. There's a 10th Circuit case that talks about that. It's about the use, whether assault weapons are used for things like self-defense, and they're not.
Wow.
I can't think of a single instance where that has been the case.
There's a few that I could think of, but you know, the Second Amendment doesn't say that you have the right to bear arms for self-defense. It simply talks about the right to bear arms. You know, the Attorney General, the acting Attorney General, Todd Blanche, says that the Second Amendment is not a suggestion. It's not a second-class right. So those who live in Denver who may want to own one of these firearms, which are in regular use, you don't believe that their Second Amendment rights are being violated here? It's about the constitutionality of it, not necessarily about how many people own it, as you said.
I don't. The Second Amendment is not an absolute right. And in fact, Barry Arrington, the DOJ attorney who's brought this case, brought a similar case in 2022 on behalf of a private gun owners group. He dismissed the case with prejudice because they weren't able to show the common use factor, that it was used in a common way for defense and other things. So again, this isn't restricting the right to bear arms. Homeowners and residents of Denver can own handguns, but they just can't own these assault weapons, which have been linked to, 4 different mass killings incidents we've had in Colorado.
Well, yeah, but according to the broader data from the Department of Homeland Security, it's actually pistols that are used the most in these mass shootings. And according to FBI data, more people are murdered with hands, fists, hammers, and baseball bats every year than with modern sporting rifles. So to say that this is the problem with crime in our big cities, it doesn't really add up with the data. But Doug Friednash, great to see you. Thank you so much for coming on to have a debate about this. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me.
Yep. All right, coming up, something that should be unthinkable in this day and age. Tens of thousands of dogs are still being tested on in American labs. Not lab rats, lab dogs. We're asking the government to put a stop to it. Up next. Welcome back. Well, if you love dogs, then your social media is likely filled with videos like this. Happy beagles sniffing the grass and running around with their friends. But not long ago, those same beagles were locked away in cages, awaiting a fate that none of us could imagine. They were the Ridge Glen Beagles, saved from the second largest breeding and research facility in the country. Wrigland is known for selling hundreds of beagles to hospitals and universities for animal testing, a practice RFK Jr. and NIH, the National Institutes of Health, planned to end. But that hasn't happened yet. Just 2 weeks ago, a grant for nearly $500,000 was given to the Oregon University School of Medicine to test a new gene therapy for a genetic disorder that affects the kidneys using a dog model. We asked FDA Commissioner Marty McCary about this in March, and he said that they were phasing out unnecessary animal testing and modernizing with AI and other technologies.
We're eliminating unnecessary animal testing. There's been a lot of animal testing each year that the FDA requires. We are getting rid of the requirements for the unnecessary animal testing. We are modernizing the agency using new technologies. They're better, cheaper, safer, and they're more humane.
So despite massive progress since Dr. Fauci was in charge of NIH, more needs to be done to ensure taxpayer dollars aren't still funding inhumane testing of these animals while also keeping humans safe with proper trials using new technologies. Joining me now is the Senior Vice President of PETA, Kathy Guillermo. Great to see you, Kathy. Thanks so much for being here. So since 2022, NIH has shut down their own internal laboratories that tested on beagles. But we're also seeing that some of this grant money, which is taxpayer money, is still going to outside grants, universities, that sort of thing. Why do you think they've been unable to end this practice and what the FDA commissioner calls unnecessary animal testing?
You know, I think there are a number of reasons. NIH has made a good start in reducing animal use and in implementing non-animal methods, but they're just not moving fast enough. They need to shut down these laboratories now, and they need to stop letting bureaucracy get in the way. But the other issue is that the FDA itself, while claiming to be reducing the use of animals, has not actually updated its regulations to reflect the law. The FDA Modernization Act 2.0 was passed in 2022, signed into law. It allows the FDA to approve new medications without testing them on animals, but the FDA itself has not updated its regulations. So a good many of these 43,000 dogs now in U.S. laboratories are being used to test new medications.
So the FDA said that they were looking into alternatives to animal testing and announced in March that they were investing $150 million into human-based research to reduce the animal models. But there is this problem where there's an inhumanity in testing on humans as well. So when I listen to the FDA commissioner say unnecessary animal testing, it seems to me that there's still some necessity to avoid this testing on humans when we're looking for new cures and new drugs. So what's the balance here?
Well, let's look at the facts. 95% of new medications that test safe and effective on animals fail in human clinical trials. We're talking a 95% failure rate from using animals, and that's all species, including dogs. So it doesn't work. We know that to begin with. And there are non-animal methods that can be used that are in use right now. But we've got to have that guidance from the FDA to the pharmaceutical industry to tell them this will now be acceptable. You prove the safety of this medication using the available non-animal methods, and we will approve it.
So is this also a problem not just at the FDA, but with pharmaceutical companies not ending this practice efficiently?
Well, you know, they're going to do what's going to get their medications through the quickest. And if the FDA is not instructing them in better methods, they're going to do what's worked in the past. So yes, I think it is a pharmaceutical industry issue, and they need to be cleaning out their own house as well.
All right. Well, Kathy, thank you so much for the discussion. We hope that the rescued beagles find a good forever home that they deserve. Great to see you. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, we're big on holidays here at NewsNation, and yesterday was May the 4th. Today is Cinco de Mayo, and we're celebrating in a very big way. We'll have plenty to taco about after the break. Well, happy Cinco de Mayo. It's also Taco Tuesday, double the celebration. So I wanted to spread some cheer to everybody, especially my friend Jesse Weber. Jesse, we have a surprise for you.
I can tell.
It's
what
very
is going
festive. I'm very jealous that I'm not there to celebrate with you. My Arizona heart is singing. But it's a great band that they found for you up in New York.
My dream has come true. I've always wanted this.
This is my dream that you're living right now. This is amazing.
budget do you have on your show? How are you able to make this happen?
Magic tricks everywhere.
I can't even do a show. This is.
You should just keep it for the full hour. I'm sure people will tune in to watch. Look at these dancing skills that Jesse Weber
Look how great
has.
this is.
And there they go. Happy Cinco de Mayo to everybody.
All right, guys, have a great night. I'll see you later. I'm going out.
That's me saying.
All I saw
Adios, amigos.
all I saw was everybody smirking for the last 10 minutes.
Yep.
That made. Where are they going? Why aren't they here for my show? I feel like
they gotta
I like that
stay.
they're following them now to the elevators to see what they do next.
I know. Well, I'm gonna go try to find some tacos. It is Taco Tuesday after all. It's Cinco de Mayo. We had to celebrate. So
That was
Jesse,
amazing. Thank you
I hope
so
you
much.
enjoyed. Sorry they couldn't stay, but they
I
got a
know.
little taste.
That was amazing. Happy Cinco de Mayo. Thank you, Katie.
Indeed. Have a great show.